describe this man. And I put up, I was looking up things on the internet about Malachy and things I know already. I put up, it was pro-life, pro-free speech, Republican and anti-drugs. And I was saying to him, God, Malachy, I would love to be introduced like that, like, you know. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Carja Gael, Malachy Steenson.
When Herman asked me to speak today, I gave it some consideration. I didn't instantly say, yes, I'll speak. I spoke at probably hundreds of commemorations, rallies and protests through the course of my life. I think the first protest I was at was not too far from here in February 1972, when as a young child I was there with my parents and we burnt down the British Embassy in response to Bloody Sunday. Before I decided to speak, I thought about it, and I thought about my grandparents who went out and joined the Republican movement in 1914 and took part and played their role in the Easter Rising. I wondered what they would have done when they put their life and liberty on the line to create the Irish Republic. I thought, what did they do in 1918 when they were again called on to defend that republic by force of arms? I wondered what they thought in 1922 when the blue shirts betrayed that republic and created partition. They took the honourable principled side and they went out again to defend that republic. They had 17 children who all served in the Republican movement. In the 40s, through Operation Harvest in the 50s, to the rebuilding in the 60s, to the war, the 70s, the 80s, and indeed in the 90s. All of their children married into the Republican movement. And I decided then that if someone like me, who was born a Republican and believes passionately in the Irish Republic, that was established on the steps of the GPO, not the Republic of Ireland announced by Costello in the 30s. It is the Irish Republic that we stand by. I thought of all those people who gave their lives in that fight to create an Irish Republic. Independent, not just of British imperialist rule, but today to be independent of European rule. We want, as set out in the proclamation, an Ireland, a nation that is sovereign, that is free, and is owned by the people of Ireland. I thought of the times when people were lying in ditches, and all I was asked to do, or indeed those who spent 60 days on hunger strike in the 40s, in the 50s, under Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael governments in this state. I thought of those who were taken out of their cells in 1922 and executed at dawn for something that they had no direct involvement in, as a sign by the blue shirts to those who will defend the Republic that we will put you in a hole, we will take you out and we will execute you. And all I was asked to do was to speak at a rally. So I made the decision that I would speak. If by me believing that this nation has the potential to be one of the best small nations in the world, if by me thinking that Irish dance and Irish culture is the best in the world, if me believing that hurling is one of the most professional, fastest, and the best game in the world. If that makes me far right, then so be it. Herman talked about free speech and a free media. We don't have a free media in this country. We have people who will all say the same things. They may nuance it in different ways. They may debate the colour of the ground, but they'll accept that it's the ground. They all argue about little things. And look at what the left, in its, I wouldn't call it opposition, but in its questioning of the lockdowns last year. They demanded that the one thing that shouldn't be locked down was the murder of unborn children. And since the people of this country removed the human rights of unborn children, 14,000 of them have been killed. If we look at, we're told that the problem in this country was the Catholic Church particularly. And we're told all of the wrong and all of the evils that they've done. Well, how was it that when the Catholic Church, religious orders, and the nuns in particular, built hospitals to heal the sick and look after the sick, the poor sick people that were being abandoned? How is it now, without church involvement, we can't even build a national children's hospital? And when they're asked for a project that was to cost 400 million, they're asked last week in this building here, how much will it cost? And the answer was more or less, sure, we'll give you the bill at the end and you'll just pay it. If you were building an extension to your house and asked somebody, some local builder to come along and do it, and he said that to you, you'd tell him to take a hike, I'm sure. The reality is that without the religious orders, there would have been no health care for the poor. We're told that the church must stay out of education. Without Edmund Rice establishing the Christian Brothers over 100 years ago, there would have been no education for ordinary people in this country. And if the state wants its own hospitals, if the state wants its own schools, we'll let them build them and let them do what they want and leave people who want to have schools with an ethos, or whether that's Catholic, Protestant, Muslim or whatever, then let them have it. The state, the continual emphasis on blaming not just the Catholic Church, but the Protestant churches to some extent as well, is because this state, since its very foundation, and it was built on a lie, and it was built on British guns attacking Irish Republicans. In order for them to sustain themselves and keep their corrupt country going, they needed somebody to step into the breach and do the jobs that the state should be doing. In any normal society, you would have public health care, you would have public schools, but this state decided not to do that. They decided to build this Tweedledum and Tweedledee politics, which leaves us in the situation where we are now, that we can't get decent health care. We were told last year that we had to lock down the country to protect the health service. We paid Paul Reid €420,000 per year to run the HSE. He must be the highest paid civil servant in the world, presiding over the most banjaxed health service in the world. And what do we get from him every day? I mean, if the man, for instance, was to spend time running the HSE rather than appearing on every radio programme and TV programme in the country, maybe we might get progress. We're told that in the 50s and the 60s that we were poor, that we were backward, that we'd no shoes, and in many cases those things were true. And why is it then that in those times we could build massive housing estates out of public money, built by local authorities in the likes of Finglas, Cabra, Ballymun, Coolock, all of these places. And now we can't build one house in a council area. There's something fundamentally wrong with what has happened. After the economic crash in 2008, they rebuilt the economy somewhat on tourism. Now all the hotels are filled with people who are alleged that they're homeless or people who have just come into the country. When this lockdown finishes, and when more and more people realise that they've been scammed right through this, what are we going to build the economy on then? There's nothing left. We're told that you're on the far right. And I used to be accused of being on the far left. But as I say, the left has left me. When trade unions were set up in Britain primarily before Ireland, and when people like James Connolly and Jim Larkin in this country were arguing for workers' rights, they wanted better working conditions for ordinary working people. They wanted better living conditions for ordinary working people. They were opposed to uncontrolled immigration because they saw that as a way of driving down labour costs. And isn't it strange that both the left and the right agree on uncontrolled immigration, because it drives down wages and it drives down the costs and increases profits then for businesses. But we need to have an immigration policy like Canada, like America, where people can come to this country, can come and work. And to be fair, you know, the health service on its knees would be in a far worse state if we didn't have the tens of thousands of Filipinos, for instance, who are there doing jobs that for some reason Irish people refuse to do. So we want an Ireland of equals. But what passes now for equality is whether you're going to fly a multicoloured rainbow flag from your house, which seems to get much more colours on it every time they bring it out. We want to have a society where all our children are cherished. As set out in the proclamation, all our children are cherished equally and are allowed to be children. We have moved on to my children are my best friend. Your children are not your best friends. Your children are your children. And they deserve to be treated like children and reared as children. Not as Herman pointed out, the event that's happening up the road. For years, I have been involved in anti-drugs work. And like Herman touched on the NGOs and all of this, there is an industry created around solving the housing problem. There is an industry created around solving the drugs problem. I'm not sure which one is bigger now, but they're on par. Those NGOs and groupings are like the tobacco industry. If a smoker dies from cancer, he has to be replaced. So it's not in any of those groups' interests to actually solve the problem. It's in their interests to continue the problem and to make it bigger. Again, in the proclamation, and I just want to quote that one paragraph from it, was, we declare the right of the people of Ireland to the ownership of Ireland and to the unfettered control of Irish destinies, to be sovereign and indefeasible. The long usurpation of that right by a foreign people and government has not extinguished that right, nor can it ever be extinguished except with the destruction of the Irish people. And those people who support, for instance, the Good Friday Agreement, as it's called, and its successor agreement, which fortified in law and in people's mind the British presence in Ireland. And they talk of a border poll and effectively a sectarian head count, which is based on the premise that if you're a Catholic, you'll vote to join this kip down here. And if you're a Unionist or a Protestant, you'll vote to stay with the Crown. Who in their right mind would vote to join this place? You'd want to be a lunatic. And in the event that that poll is lost, which I would suspect that it would be, where do they go from then? As it says in the proclamation, our right to nationhood, our right to sovereignty is indefeasible. It can't be taken by Britain or Europe, nor can it be ceded to any of those bodies by any generation of Irish people. And finally, I'd just like to finish with a quote from Terence McSweeney, who was Lord Mayor of Cork. That if but few are faithful found, they must be all the more steadfast for being a few. We are that few, and we must remain steadfast to recreate the Irish Republic as announced and defended in arms on the steps of the GPO. Gormila Mahara.